Welcome, everybody, to this Orthodox Bible study, courtesy of the parish of St. Aidan of Lindisfarne here in Manchester in the UK. Welcome also to those of you who are watching and listening from a later time on YouTube. You're very welcome. Please do consider subscribing to my channel. I believe that's what everyone has to say, and I thought I say it. Welcome to everybody who's joining us live. And we now begin chapter 5 of St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians. We've probably got about 3 or 4 more sessions left before we finish this epistle. And therefore, I think we'll have the whole. No, perhaps we will split it as it's indicated here as I share the screen. We'll split it up into 2 halves, 2 or 3 even. Here we go, sharing the screen now. Everybody see the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Brian, will you please read for us chapter 5, verses 1 to 8?
To 8. Okay. Therefore, be imitators of God as dearly loved children, and live in love, just as Christ also loved us, and gave himself for us, a sacrificial and fragrant offering to God. But among you there must not be either sexual immorality, impurity of any kind, or greed, as these are not fitting for the saints. Neither should there be vulgar speech, foolish talk, or coarse jesting, all of which are out of character, but rather thanksgiving. For you can be confident of this one thing, that no person is immoral, impure, or greedy, such a person is an idolater, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God.
I think we'll pause it there, Brian. I was distracted by the footnote, which is in blue.
Yeah.
We're stopping at verse 5, okay.
Yeah.
Imitators of God as dearly loved children, and live in love, just as also Christ also loved us and gave himself for us, a sacrificial and fragrant offering to God. So this sets the tone, doesn't it, of really the whole of chapter 5. And I think we would do well to keep remembering that this is the frame. The behaviors that we are to abhor, repudiate, set aside, and the behaviors that we are to embrace in a very practical way when he talks about children, parents, husbands and wives later, which we're not considering now. All of this really is framed by this conviction that the life we live as Christians must be as those of children of God who are born, to use John's words, not of the flesh, but of the Spirit, that we might become children of God and walk in the light. That the Semitic use of the word walk, which in Greek is peripateo, which is obviously like peripatetic, means obviously a walk with God, a close communion, a fellowship, and an adoption of a Christian way of life, even such as we might be said to imitate God himself, and specifically imitate God in the sacrificial offering of his Son, a sweet and fragrant offering, so that the sweet and fragrant offering we offer to God is to live in love, just as Christ also loved us. If we just briefly flip to the Fathers for these opening verses, which are really, really beautiful, and bring them up on the page. Jerome, whether it is possible for humans to imitate God. When he wrote to the Corinthians, that is Paul, of course, indeed he said, be imitators of me. For though they could not instantaneously become imitators of Christ, it was still a great thing for them if they could be imitators of the imitator. But to the Ephesians, since they are those to whom he has revealed such great mysteries, he neither says, be imitators of me, nor be imitators of Christ, but be imitators of God. This does not imply that it is less to be an imitator of Christ than of God, for Christ is God. Admittedly, much that God has done, we humans can hardly be said to imitate. But in the way that he is merciful to all and reigns on the good and the bad, bit of Ecclesiastes there, so we may pour out mercy upon all we meet. When we do this, we shall be beloved children. We shall be imitating either Paul or, as I rather think, God himself. And then Chrysostom on walking in love. If I can get my mouse to behave. I want to do a lot more of the fathers tonight as we go through. St. John Chrysostom, see how love is the foundation of everything. Where love is present, there is no anger, no passion, no railing, no blasphemy. All this is put away. Now he states his chief point. How have you become a child? Because you have been reconciled. On the same basis on which you have received so great a privilege, offer this same gift to others. And as the Lord has loved you, so you love your neighbor. Even if you're not able to do that completely, you must do it according to your ability. And then finally, the fragrant offering, the sacrifice to God in relation to Christ's sacrifice on the cross. St. John Chrysostom, you spare your friends. He spared his enemies. He suffered on his enemies' behalf. This is the fragrant offering, the acceptable sacrifice. If you suffer for your enemies as a fragrant offering, you too become an acceptable sacrifice even if you die. This is what it means to imitate God. Love your enemies, of course. I was reading this week an extract, and Father Daniel will probably be able to say more to this than I, since it's an account of Romanian Christians in the time of Ceausescu and the Marxist regime, where countless people, as indeed throughout the whole of the Eastern Bloc, were incarcerated, tortured, imprisoned, and indeed killed. Pastor Richard Wurmbrand, who was a Lutheran pastor, I think, wrote a beautiful and moving piece of when he was in prison with a Romanian Orthodox priest, and he was being bitterly tortured by his captors. And Wurmbrand recounts that it wasn't just, hatred against Christians. Sometimes it will be hatred against those who are against Christians. But it would just be hatred. It would be hatred even between the guards and each other and anything that came in their way. It was just simply hatred.
Yes.
And this, and this
Yes,
Romanian priest, do you remember this?
This is not only happened in Romania. This is
Yeah.
not only happened in Romania, Father. It happened in other Eastern European countries. But in Romania in particular, was this process, which I don't really want to talk too much now. But anyway, for people interested, this process of re-education, which they try to do. The irony of it is the re-educator, in their own time, they become re-educated by other people, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So that
and in this particular incident, this Romanian priest embraced his persecutor and said, I love you and I forgive you.
Yes.
And even though he died, this had a powerful impact on the people who were persecuting them.
Yes,
and
this is extraordinary, and I don't think he's a Christian Orthodox, by the way, because
no, Wurmbrand wasn't, but he was, Father Wurmbrand
Catholics.
wasn't. He was a Lutheran, but he was
Yes.
in jail with a Romanian priest. Yeah.
This is extraordinary. Extraordinary account. I read it,
Yeah.
Father. I've seen it on your Facebook, and I read it. Yes, extraordinary account.
Corrie ten Boom talks about the situation where after the war was over, and I think she was in England or Holland, where she was at a meeting, and at the back she recognized one of the prisoners, one of the guards.
SS, one of the SS officers. Yeah.
And she found she had to struggle with this, and she was able to. It was really important.
My recollection, Pam, is that she was able to because she said, Lord, I cannot forgive this man, but let me be your forgiveness for him. And she went up to him and embraced him and shook his hand. That's my recollection of the story.
Yeah.
one priest monk, Father, which I had the opportunity to meet him in person for some time back there in Romania as a student. I'm talking about 1990s. Was Father Justin Pârvu, who was incarcerated by the communists for 13 years. He never spoke to me directly what he's been through, and I've never heard him talking about what's been through. But when he had the opportunity to meet after our liberation, our revolution, 1989, he met his oppressors. He said to them, I forgive you for what you did to me. I hope you can. I know the good Lord will forgive you, but I hope you can forgive yourself.
Wow. So this is what it is to be imitators of God, isn't it? To have the same heart.
Father Dumitru Staniloae, because he also has been incarcerated by the communists only for a short period of time, if I remember correctly, 3 or 5 years. He said that because the incarnation, if I understood correctly, Father, because of the incarnation, we are already sons and daughters of God the Father through adoptions, not through birth. Because the Son of God become human, we, even if we realize or not, even if we recognize or not, we are already children of God by adoption. Each and every single one of us. And our love should be, as Christ's love, a sacrificial love. And his sacrifice, it was not compulsory. Nobody asked him to do it, Father. His sacrifice was because he wanted to do that.
Voluntary.
And this is that fragrant offering to God, because God the Father was absolutely pleased with the purpose of his Son. The price of blood he paid to get us back from the slavery of sin and death.
Thank you, Father. If we move back to the text now that we've got that frame, we need to keep that frame that Father Daniel's been talking about clearly in mind when we start looking at the things that we're to put aside. But among you there must be not either be sexual immorality, impurity of any kind, or greed, for these are not fitting for the saints. Neither should there be vulgar speech, foolish talk, coarse jesting, all of which are out of character, but rather thanksgiving. For you can be confident of this one thing, that no one who is immoral, impure, or greedy, such a person as an idolater, we need to look at that in a moment, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. So the ethical standards of Christian behavior, which flow from the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, are fullness of life, because all of this other stuff is demeaning. I think that's the best word I can find, demeaning to the dignity of what it is to be human, and more than that can be destructive even. But at the very least, it's demeaning. It's not exalting the best of humanity, which is in the image of God. So when we are reconciled to God, we have to thoroughly root out all of these aspects that belong to the old man or the old woman, the old life. And that will be different for each one of us, because we've all got different temptations. Another one might almost say legacy items of our previous life. And some of the most powerful testimonies of people being brought to Christ have been when people have been honest about their former life and how God has changed them. But it's a struggle, isn't it? For all of us, a struggle against the old person, the old man within us is an ongoing, lifelong struggle, and it ain't easy, because sometimes the idolatry can be subtle, not crass and obvious. You know what I mean? But it's interesting, isn't it, that St. Paul characterizes a greedy person as an idolater. I think the fathers have something to say about that. I'll just flip back somewhere. Right. Theodoret of Tyre, Antiochian, got into a bit of trouble at one point with Nestorianism, but a lot of his stuff's very good. Paul also makes this point in his letter to the Corinthians. He speaks of covetousness as idolatry, reminding us of the Lord saying, no one can serve two masters. You cannot serve God and mammon. Well, you think, ding, that's the epiphany moment, isn't it? When we remember the saying, no one can serve two masters, you cannot serve God and mammon. So idolatry manifests itself in all forms of greed. You remember that film in the 1990s, the creed of which was Greed is Good? Somebody tell me the title of it. Oh, can't remember now. Wall Street.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, that was awful.
Yeah. Who was the actor? I can't remember now.
Oh, what's his name?
Douglas's son, Michael Douglas.
Michael Douglas, that's right. Yeah. Greed, I think it was, or was it his son?
His son, Michael Douglas.
Yeah. That's right, because his father was Kirk, wasn't he? Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes flaunt their greed as being part of our economic productivity and therefore desirable. You know, it's part of the
Something
kind of.
Thatcher brought in.
Sorry?
Something that Thatcher brought in that was okay to be greedy.
Yes, Harry Enfield. I'm serious about clearer politics, but Harry Enfield had this sketch at the time, which loads of money.
Money.
I believe, Father, it's even more difficult in today's society in which, forgive me if I put it bluntly, as I have it in front of me, fornication becomes some sort of norm generally accepted by the society. And I'm not talking about only the English society. I'm talking about Romanian society. I'm talking about all the societies. It's generally accepted that it is absolutely normal to live with someone as a man and woman outside the blessing of the church. And it's such a norm that we think is normal when in fact it's not normal. So, but only by speaking about it and trying to correct this behavior, because from my point of view, this is what St. Paul talks about straight away, by fornication and all uncleanness, then it becomes very difficult. And all the young people coming through, seeing how the adults live and how they spend their life, believes that is absolutely normal. In certain aspects, the sin became so normal that we cannot. That's why St. Paul is all new, that changed the old with the new. It's so difficult to see through it and to know the right thing for me.
And very often, of course,
I think the problem is the 1960s with the sexual revolution brought about a wholesale revolution in Western societies and those societies affected by the West. That I think that whereas, you know, I think it would be naive to suggest that everything before the 60s was hunky-dory and, you know, everybody got married and there were no children born out of wedlock. Very, very often that is very far from the case. But I think it is a sustainable argument that, because I was born in 1953, there is a sustainable argument that before the 1960s, there was a widespread acceptance of the value of marriage and that one would strive to be sexually continent before marriage, even if not everyone was capable of doing it. In other words, there was a widespread acceptance of the importance of marriage within society. But I think there has been a systematic deconstruction of what is often called the traditional family unit, to the point of saying, well, you know, marriage is all right if you like it, kind of thing, rather than marriage as an inherent value that we should, those of us who are called to marriage, should all aspire to. That has been the attitudinal change after the 1960s. And so I think that, I don't know, maybe I'm too traditional, but I think that a woman is impressed by a man who doesn't expect her to leap into bed almost at the first meeting. Yes. You know, a woman will respect a man who has restraint.
Yes.
And that's how I prefer to see it, because very often the woman was blamed while the men were allowed a degree of indulgence.
That's correct.
And the women were blamed. You know, to correct this, we need men to be, you know, to be a better example of the male of the species to women than they currently are, because a lot of women will feel that it's expected of them, and therefore that if they're going to keep their man, they must be available to him all the way, rather than develop the relationship, get married, and then deepen it. And the other thing, of course, we've got in the West is people say, oh, well, you know, it's only a bit of paper. You know, it's only a bit of paper. And the thing is, that itself, I maintain, is a result of the Western emphasis on marriage being a contract rather than a sacrament.
Yeah.
You know, if you think marriage has been, you know, part and parcel of human societies before and after Christ in all different parts of the world, many different religions, etc., from time immemorial, or at least in terms of recorded culture. So we're not saying that, you know, for marriage to be what it is, it's got to be celebrated as a sacrament of the church. But what we are saying by that is there has always been a religious component in marriage. You know, lots of different religions. There's always been a religious component to it. But if you think that marriage is just a contract, then it is just a bit of paper, and why bother?
That makes it all the easier to then break out of that covenant, because you don't really see it as much more than, you know, like a legally binding contract. And I think it's another issue is just how nothing's sacred anymore. And well, not just the Western one, it's becoming the case across the world. But yeah, there's hardly anything sacred anymore for most people. So it's just kind of seen as, you know, like you said, it's just a piece of paper. Why does it matter if we get divorced? Oh, well, we gave it a good go. Who cares? Kind of, you know, it's just sad. And obviously, a lot of the time, kids are on the receiving end of the negatives of that, because people will have children and then get divorced and just think it's kind of normal for kids to be in broken apart families. And it's just not at all. So, yeah, it's really sad. But there you go.
Do you think there's a sign, Thomas, of a change? Gen Z or Gen Z, if there are Americans watching this, we call it Gen Z, folks. Do you think there is a change in young people of your generation?
I'd say there is to an extent. I think it's kind of going both ways. There's a lot more, as we're seeing a lot of younger people come into the church who are kind of seeking tradition and something, you know, grounded, more deeply grounded than all the frivolity and madness of our world. I think it kind of goes both ways. You've got people that are just getting increasingly worse, and, you know, obviously with pornography and OnlyFans and all this kind of stuff. And just, you know, hookup culture, and it's getting worse in one way, but then you're getting a lot of younger people who are going the exact opposite direction, because I think they're probably, even if they're not indulging in it themselves, they're kind of seeing it happening around them and realizing pretty quickly that it's just vapid and empty and soulless, and there's nothing, you know, it's just there's no depth to it, and it doesn't lead you to a good place. So I think they're kind of searching after something deeper and more than that, which is, in a way, it's a good thing, because it's leading a lot of people to the faith and to the church. So yeah, I think it goes both ways. You can kind of see positives and negatives. It's getting better and also worse at the same time. So,
some research I've read recently from the States suggests that amongst the younger element of Gen Z, there is less interest in developing romantic relationships, that they're concentrating on their job, their career, their qualifications, their studies, whatever. They're less inclined to be hanging around in clubs and stuff, hoping to hook up with people. They're less inclined to do that. So it's almost like they've not yet committed themselves to something deeper, but at least they're recognizing that actually, is it worth it? You know what I mean? It's a bit negative, but it could just reflect the fact that people are stepping back from the crowd. I mean, it's very difficult. Maybe it's because I'm an only child, but I've never been interested in doing what everybody else does. It's just never interested me. Maybe because I've never really fitted in. I've never really desired to fit in. Maybe that's the way I kind of survived. I've got that kind of personality. I really couldn't give a damn what people think about me or whether I'm doing the same thing that they are. And I think I just long for the time when people have their own mind and not just go with the crowd. Because once you start making decisions for yourself, rather than thinking, oh, well, John's doing it, Mary's doing it, whatever it is, and I don't just mean sexuality, you know, everybody's wanting a bigger and better car. We want to change our phones every 2 years. Why? You know, stop and think. That's what, I mean, initially, I think that's all we need to be saying to people is stop and think. You're on this carousel and it's getting faster and faster and faster and faster. You've got people shouting at you from all angles. Just stop and think.
Yeah, I can agree with that one. It's always I'm an only child as well, but it's always frustrated me. It's sort of I think it's just it's human nature for a lot of people though to just kind of go with the crowd because it tends to be the safest option, even if it isn't. And obviously with what we're discussing,
it isn't, is it?
Yeah, exactly. That's the kind of sad thing. But I think
it's not nature.
Nature is just to kind of follow what everyone else is doing because
it's not nature.
The desire to fit in, and well, no, I won't say it's nature exactly because that, but it's I think to just want to fit in and always follow what everyone else is doing so they're not ostracized, so they're part of the community. And you can understand it, but it is just silly.
I'm interested in what you said, Thomas, about nothing is sacred anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Let's broaden the discussion. Let's go to the people contributing. What is sacred, and how might the idea of something which is sacred change people's mentalities? Some churches, not Orthodox, hopefully, people go to church because they want to be entertained or inspired or feel better. But do they go because they're seeking holiness? Do they go because they're seeking the presence of God in their midst? Well, many of them do, but I think there is increasingly, particularly in certain parts of Protestant culture, a kind of entertainment emphasis for worship. That is a worldly thing, and it's also very divisive because the music I like is not going to be the music that you like, for example, necessarily. And then there creeps in this idea. I know a person, obviously I'm not going to name him or her, who dismisses orthodoxy because he or she thinks that our worship style is not modern and doesn't relate to young people. This is the kind of attitude towards worship which thinks that, unless some people like Coldplay, for example. Coldplay are a very good band. They're extremely popular. I hate them.
I think,
but if you go to a church where it's all Coldplay style, you're only going to get the people who come together with that particular value in entertainment. And then you start having to say, well, we need something where people can gather according to age or culture or type or gender or whatever. And then church becomes a kind of commodified entity of providing stuff that people like rather than an experience of the sacred.
Sure. I think, Father, I agree with what you're saying, but it's become very clear to me recently that we need to put our own house in order, particularly over Easter, over Pascha. And I don't know what Father Daniel would think of this, and I'm not singling out, well, I am to a certain extent. We had our Easter vigil this year. We had people drinking cans of beer at the back of the church. We had people being abusive. People were abusive to Father Samuel when he tried to reprimand them. And,
great.
Yeah. Eastern European people who were coming, and we've got lots of Romanians, lots of Eastern European people in our parish, wonderful people. But there were people who just come along at Easter, and it's a purely cultural thing, to the point where they were being abusive to the priest, laughing at people who was crossing themselves and, venerating the icons. And I thought, hang on, what's going on here? Why are these people even attending church in the first place?
Were they allegedly Orthodox? Were they allegedly Orthodox?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, I'm being blunt, I'm being honest. And it's easy for us to point the finger at the happy clappy people or the people who like U2 style worship or Coldplay worship. Let's look at ourselves. Let's look at our own house in order. Because yes, Orthodoxy.
I mean, honestly, I'm sorry. If that happened in the church that I serve, and I'm sure that Father Daniel would agree with me, I would instruct the doorkeepers to remove them.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
If they wouldn't go, they wouldn't go, I would call the police and declare a disturbance in public worship. There is no way I would allow such persons to stay in the church.
But I'm not talking about your parish. I'm making a general point, because I think, you go back in this country 100 years, 50 years, 40 years, you'd get people turning up at midnight mass, drunk.
Christmas.
Yeah, Christmas. And they, heckling the vicar and stuff. Very good natured. This was actually quite alarming.
It was more threatening, was it?
Sorry?
More threatening, was it?
Yeah. And I'm thinking, people say about, yes, worship as entertainment. No, we don't do that as Orthodox. But we can't sit on our high horse and say, oh, look at them over there. They just worship. It's all entertainment. There's people coming along because they want the magic light, they want the magic blessing of the priest, and I think we've got to be aware of that, and we've got to call that out.
Yeah, but you can't be wanting a blessing from the priest and at the same time being abusive of it.
Well, yeah, exactly. It doesn't make sense, does it? But that's what was happening.
I totally agree with Philip. I'm absolutely sure that that's how it happened. It could have been Romanians, by all means. I can give you an example of Father Michael Mihai from Scontor, which is Romanian. And on Easter, not this Easter, last Easter, the Romanian coming to church put coins in the money basket and he was picking up the banknotes. So this is what Romanians did to a Romanian priest. So I totally agree with you. All I like to say that these are the people which are not coming to church for the right reasons.
Yes.
There is still this tradition that, let's go and take the light. Because Father Michael, for example, he's got 20 people at liturgy on Sundays, 30 people, I don't know, something like this. Then all of a sudden in Easter night, you have 200, 250 people there. So it's still this mentality, as you say, the magic light or the blessing from the church. Being a bit intoxicated, it adds to it. So this has happened, yes. This has happened in Romania too. Yeah. I totally agree with this. I don't think these people live a Christian Orthodox life. Although they might be baptized Christian Orthodox because their parents or their grandparents insisted to. I personally I can only apologize if they're Romanians or even if they're not Romanians. I apologize.
You don't need to. We've seen plenty of examples of this from the English.
But it is happened. They have nothing to do. They have nothing to do with the church. It's
Absolutely.
just a tradition.
I would balance out what I'm saying is that there were many of the Romanian faithful there who were as appalled.
I believe so.
They were by no means colluding with this or accepting this at all in any way, shape, or form. So I'm not making it as a blanket criticism of.
No, we know you're not, Phil.
At all.
It's all right. No, we know you're not. No. But I think it raises a very important issue, and then we must go back to the text because we are drifting a bit. It raises a very important question, which Father Daniel and myself are now facing, and we've just had an email exchange about this, about people who. It's about baptism, isn't it, Father Daniel?
Yes, Father, I know. I read the email. Yes.
Yeah, because you've had experience of this in recent times. I won't say when, because then it'll appear we're talking about specific family. Yeah, exactly. But in recent times, we are encountering more people now bringing babies back to church to be baptized. With adults, it's different because they part of the catechumen and everything else. But some of them Some, not all, by any means, because I had a wonderful example recently of a couple who encountered St. Aidan's, and you can tell in their faces that they are genuine Orthodox Christians. But some of them are using the church as a convenience or as a kind of cultural artifact, or because they have a family member that's pestering them to get their kid baptized.
Mhm.
And when you say you've got to come to the church, we will not talk about dates for baptism, but you've got to come to the liturgy at least X number of times. This is what we're doing at the moment. And then some of them, I won't say when, because I want to identify the families concerned. And some of them come to the liturgy, and what they do is they do what a lot of people do, actually. They know the liturgy is about an hour and a half long, so they come for the last quarter of an hour. Some of them even receiving communion, or you've never seen them before in your life.
Wow.
They're Orthodox. Now, the problem is not limited to the Orthodox Church. It affects every church, and probably quite across all human cultures. But the only other church, and I'm not criticizing this church, but as you know, I used to be an Anglican priest. And we, as Anglican priests and congregations, struggled with this all the time. You want people to take baptism seriously. I mean, Pam, you're an Anglican. We want people to take baptism seriously and the dedication to a life as a disciple of Christ. And you do lots of things. I mean, in my in-laws parish in Northwich, they, after the baptism on a Sunday, they say you come back the next week for the baptism certificate. You know, and the idea basically is that if they come back again, and if they don't come back again, the vicar visits them so they don't escape. But they did this while I was there, I think, as far as I can remember, it's many, many years ago. But it doesn't make any difference, actually.
No.
It's only when people realize that the Christian life is not a cultural experience in the first place, but it's a commitment to Christ. It's a believing on him. It's a surrender of your life to him to become a disciple. It's taking up the way of the cross. It's listening to the sermons. Yeah, I hate it when Orthodox come in halfway through and then think, oh, we don't bother with the sermon and the readings. The bishop has made it clear you do not come after the reading start. You come before the reading starts. Particular sin in the Orthodox, wandering in halfway through or deducting 20 minutes from the end, so you just get communion and don't come to the rest. So indeed, Philip, we have a lot to put in order in our own house. And perhaps one of the problems that we've got is that Orthodox worship, we've allowed it to become a spectator sport. We've allowed it to become ooh, let's go and see this, rather than here I am in the presence of Christ, of my brothers and sisters, and I am going to be changed, and I want to be changed. I'm not here just to spectate. I'm here to be transformed. And the key to that is repentance, right? So Paul's remonstration here in these opening verses of chapter 5 remind us that he, even with the Ephesians, I mean, why else would he say these things? They're so blindingly obvious that you're not going to fornicate and you're not got to be evil gossipers and money grubbers and idolaters. I mean, it's so obvious, isn't it? So why is he writing this to the Ephesians if it's not because he himself is struggling with this, even with an infant church like the church at Ephesus? So I don't think we're dealing with a new situation here, but we've got to be firmer in our discipline and not let, whereas we're always open and we're always welcoming, we mustn't let people, well, Jesus said, don't cast your pearls before swine. And I feel sometimes that's precisely what we're doing. We're casting our pearls before swine.
I don't think people realize the vows they make in church on behalf of their child are vows to God.
Yes. Exactly.
And the seriousness. I mean, I'm sure we've all done that, made promises to God and not followed through.
Yeah.
But it's a serious sin. It's a serious problem that goes with you.
I think when we preach or welcome people and we're warm towards them, we do say, look, this is the promise you're making here to the Lord. You're not making it to the priest. You're not making it, because it's just something you have to say in the service. It's actually a promise you're making to God. And God will expect you to give a good account of the promises that you make. So don't treat them. You wouldn't say this in such a direct way, perhaps you'd cast it in a more diplomatic way. But I'm being straightforward here, calling a spade a spade. You don't trivialize a commitment with the Almighty, because He will ask you for an account of your commitments. And I think we need to be much more emphatic about that, rather than. I mean, it's just like when the deacon says in the worship, wisdom attend. Why do you say that? Oh, no, it's in the book. No, it's because you're supposed to listen to the readings and listen to the sermon. That's why it's there. It's not there just as a nice little liturgical bit that the deacon says, oh, isn't that nice? That's spectatorism. It's there to transform you. Right. Father Daniel, will you please read verses 6 to 14 there in front of you?
6 to 14, Father.
Please.
Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore, do not be partakers with them. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light, for the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, finding out what is acceptable to the Lord. And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of those things which are done by them in secret. But all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light, for whatever makes manifest is light. Therefore, he says, awake, you who sleep, arise from the dead, and Christ will give you life.
Right, thank you, Father. You're reading from a slightly different translation, but that's okay. It's very interesting, actually. If you look at verse 9, Father, you read, for the fruit of the Spirit consists in all goodness. It's very interesting because the different manuscripts, if we have a look here at footnote 13, in the different manuscripts, some of them read fruit of the light. Most of them actually read fruit of the light, but some manuscripts have fruit of the Spirit.
I'm reading from the Orthodox Study Bible, Father.
Yeah. And this is a translation of the Greek. Yes. This is translation from the Greek different from that of the Orthodox Study Bible, but it's either pneumatos in verse 9, which some can you see here? Pneumatos.
Yes, Father.
But in other places it's photos. So it doesn't really matter, because you walk in the light, you walk in the fruit of the Spirit, the fruit of the light is saying much the same thing, isn't it?
If it's not correct, Father, if you can let us know, and then I can arrange the version which we can all.
Well, it's on the screen, Father. It's on the shared screen.
I'm on the phone, and I barely see. Sorry.
All right, no problem. It's no problem because it's the same text, isn't it? It's just slightly different words. So Paul really expands his theme that the fruit of these evils is disobedience. And so we're moving from darkness to light, from the fruit of disobedience to the fruit of obedience. And disobedience only brings forth the wrathful side of God's love, because we are turning away from God's love, and we're experiencing the pain that comes from turning away from the love of God. And maybe a whole society or culture can do this. They can actually turn away. A lot of the Old Testament prophets, particularly the 8th century prophets, read Amos, read Hosea. They're confronting a society that have lost their first love. and the evils that have become manifest in them, which are essentially evils of idolatry, of putting oneself and one's desires above what God and one's fellow man or woman, the 8th century prophets were identifying as a society forsaking their first love. And I'm not being judgmental. I'm just simply saying this is what I see. This is what I see in Western society now.
Yep.
You consider the contribution of Christianity to health, welfare, the relief of poverty, education, inspirational institutions that educate the young and bring forth the best, the contribution to the economic wealth and health of the country. All of this contribution from Christian culture is now in the West, at least in my own country, the one that I know, being squandered. And now people want all these good things, health, welfare, prosperity, and everything else, from a process that has nothing to do with God whatsoever. God is trundled out at a royal wedding, or he's trundled out at some sort of happy time at Christmas, or we sing a few carols, we go down to the boozer, and then we might go to midnight mass. But this is not a Christian society. If that's a Christian society, I've really... You know, how can you square this with what we're reading here? You can't, can you? If you ask people, are you a Christian? They'll probably say, oh, well, I don't believe in all that rubbish. Or they'll say, of course I am. But the people who say, of course I am, will include some genuine believers, but they'll also include a lot of people for whom it's nothing other than a tribal annotation. It's like, I'm not... Very often, what people mean is, I'm not a Muslim. Or, you know what I mean? It's nothing essentially driven by faith. It's simply a tribal identity.
I think we're seeing a lot of people now who are kind of reactionary against a lot of the craziness in our culture, are kind of readopting the name Christian purely because they see it as the English kind of cultural heritage or the Western cultural heritage, which it is obviously, but that's the only reason they're kind of readopting it. A lot of them don't have a genuine belief, but it's almost as though it's a reaction against, far left politics and Islam and, trans ideology and you can understand why people do it, but there's no genuinity or genuineness to it. So it's just a cultural label that they go, well, that's English, that's our tradition. It's like, well, it is, but there's more to it than that. You can't just, and it kind of frustrates me because I associate with, not personally with some of these people, but I see them online in just various circles, and you just think you're just saying you're a Christian just because you think it's traditional and it's right wing, and it's kind of sad, really. There's a lot who are, but there's a lot who aren't, who just, it's purely a kind of St. George's Cross kind of thing, and it's just a bit fake, so it's a shame.
But if we have contact, then there have to be good gatekeepers with good gatekeeping protocols, because otherwise you get all sorts of undesirable people in there, white supremacists, people who just want to have an enemy for the other person, whoever the other person is. So there has to be good gatekeeping. But on the other hand, there will be a lot of other people who are genuinely getting disenamored, disillusioned with the direction of Western culture. And somehow we have to reach out to them and say, look, this is how we live. We're not judging anyone else, but as Christians, this is how we live. Come and see how we live, how we worship, what we believe. Come to our church and see if you can find anything different here. And let's hope, by the grace and mercy of God, that people do find something different there. Right? It's the come and see thing, isn't it?
Taste and see that the Lord is good.
Taste and see that the Lord is good. Yeah. Awake, O sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine upon you.
This must be some sort of hymn, Father, or a chant or song.
Yes.
Old song, accustomed to Jewish people, or accustomed probably to early Christians.
Yes, nobody really knows what Paul is quoting from, because if you notice in verse 14, it says, "For everything made visible is light. For this reason, it says." he's quoting from a source. And yet the fathers, I could bring up the fathers again to show you that they themselves say, we know, I think Jerome says that he has not found this as a quotation in any scripture. So it was unknown to Jerome. When was Jerome writing? I can't remember. 6th, 7th century, something like that. Phil, you were going to say something?
I think, wasn't he? I can't remember exactly. Was he 4th, 5th, or 6th century? Something a bit earlier.
I can't remember. Anyway, the point is that Jerome's an early witness of the fact that the fathers didn't know what Paul was quoting from.
Which is interesting because it implies that there were hymns and liturgical material around, which.
Oh yeah.
Last.
I mean, there's people who have a better grasp of biblical Greek than I have. Scholarship has determined that there are, in even Paul's letters, stanzas of hymns that have become part of his teaching. Like, I think one candidate is Philippians, for Christ did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but instead emptied himself, taking upon him a form of a servant, became obedient even unto death on a cross, whereby God has exalted him. You know what I'm referring to. That has the strophic, am I using the right word, structure of a hymn. And indeed, that I think in one of the Anglican hymnals there is a hymn actually called "Sleepers Awake." I don't know how.
Salute the Happy Morn.
Salute the Happy Morn. Yeah, it's a resurrection hymn. So people are, if you Google it, you'll find that this particular verse 14, has been incorporated in a lot of Western hymns. Shall we just, since we're talking about worship, are we okay for a 10-minute overrun?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anthony, could you read, please, verses 15 to 21?
Yeah. Therefore, we consider carefully how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, taking advantage of every opportunity because the days are evil. For this reason, do not be foolish, but be wise, by understanding what the Lord's will is. And do not get drunk with wine, which is debauchery, but be filled by the Spirit. Oh, I thought you said to 19, didn't you?
Right, sorry, I meant 20. I meant 21. Carry on.
Oh, okay, yeah. Speaking to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing and making music in your hearts to the Lord, always giving thanks to God the Father for all things in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, and submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ.
Isn't it? You just read that, you think that's enough. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wise.
Be wise, be sober, be filled with the Spirit, sing your hearts out to the Lord, and then finally, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ, not pushing yourself forward, considering the benefit of others to be your first call.
Yeah.
We just flip to the fathers now for this last section. Not as unwise, but as wise. Ambrosiaster, Paul has previously ordained that false and vicious lives be exposed by the servants of God. He now adds a qualifier. They are to be exposed in a careful manner to avoid scandal. The faithful must be prudent in their conduct among the faithless, especially at a time when the faithless hold dominion, which of course is now, trusting in an unholy ruler. If then a Christian encounters a troubler who is turbulent and angry, he should be cautious in his presence so as not to incite him to blaspheme or raise a storm. He will utter his words where occasion offers.
Okay.
Very wise, isn't it? So part of our wisdom is know when to speak and when not to speak. If it just takes someone who is troubled and turbulent and makes them more so, that's on us. So we have to say what is timely to bring out the best in a person or to effect some sort of change rather than just, lock horns. The days are evil, Chrysostom is just making clear that time isn't bad, which is, needn't detain us, right? Maintain sobriety. It is, Ambrosiaster, it is good conduct that strikes fear in the wrongdoer. Only one who is sober is prepared to counsel another realistically and with confidence. The person being counseled feels less resentment when he knows how good is the actual conduct of the one who admonishes him. In other words, you can't fruitfully admonish anyone unless you are humble, repentant, full of the Spirit, exhibit a holiness of life, which really is the strongest influence you can have on that person, that they will then be open to what you have to say. So when people come for counsel, they've got to know that you love them, you care for them, you want their highest good, and it's how you speak with them, the questions that you ask them, how you phrase it. It's all part and parcel of bringing forth a fruitful life in yourself and in others. Now, this thing, when all these demons have been departed from the soul, the 7 demons who left and then the others returned, making the condition of the soul worse than the first, Christ teaching about this. You have to replace the demonic with the spiritual. You actually have to be filled with the Spirit. So Spirit-filled worship, where there is a genuine engagement of heart and mind, is what actually brings forth the fruit of the Spirit. In other words, a holy life isn't just resisting evil, it's being filled with the Spirit. And that is manifest, of course, in the spiritual character of our worship. And then finally, giving thanks to God in all things. Praise be to God for everything that happens, the good and the bad. And finally, submitting to one another. So just in the closing minutes, I'll go back to the scripture and we can just think for a moment of those examples of where something has really worked for good in our churches, something that has actually caused a revolution in someone's life through gentleness, through holiness, through a good example. I'm not asking people to share names, but maybe someone has got a story of someone whose life's been changed by encountering true holiness in a church. Maybe it's a friend, someone you know, whose life's been completely transformed. No? No stories to tell?
Well, I'll say after the baptism, I'll definitely say my mum felt it for sure. She was really moved by the whole ordeal herself, and so she definitely is now looking to even attend a couple divine liturgies herself because she felt that connection there. My auntie, the other lady that was with my mother, the one who wasn't covered up with the headscarf, she is ironically very similar to the type of person you're talking about before that says that they only prefer their charismatics because they like the music. And she basically just said, "Oh, that stuff's boring to me, right?" But she really felt it when she was there and really enjoyed it, shockingly for her. Now, me, I'm the opposite. I've gone to Pentecostal churches. I just can't. I'm sorry, I can't do it. I can't do the charismatic thing. I need order. And to me, I just can't see people going as order to me. So that's why this is how I do it. So I can say it's changed her in the sense that it's actually gotten her to take the faith more seriously. And most of my family are now even just a little bit more religious than they were before. So I can say it does definitely have an impact. And it has an impact on me. And that has affected how a lot of my family and even my friends are beginning to view our faith.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm very pleased. Praise God that there's been a positive impact on someone's life.
Yeah.
Well, maybe this is, sorry, yes, Thomas, go on.
I was just going to say, yeah, that's really good to hear. I've seen that with various people that we've seen come to St Aidan's, and also when I occasionally come to Holy Cross up here in Morecambe, the amount of people that are standing up, you know, they're kind of just looking into it, and then the first time they attend the liturgy, they're just hooked. Kind of, not that's probably the wrong phrase to use, but in a good way. They kind of they feel it, they see it, and they realize that, you know, this is how it should be. I know a guy at Holy Cross in Morecambe who's a young guy, ex-Mormon, who's now left the Mormon church, and within 2 liturgies, he's a catechumen. Well, he's going to be a catechumen. Another few people. One guy's in a healing ministry in kind of like charismatic churches. A guy from America. He's been to that church twice, and that's his church now. So, and it's his job to work for this, you know, Protestant, I think it's charismatic kind of group, and he's now attending Sundays at an Orthodox church because, again, he came to a liturgy and was like, "This is it. This is what it's all about." And I mean, this is the same with people at St Aidan's I've met. It's happening all the time. So, I mean, that's partially.
Do we have it? This is wonderful, Thomas, and I wouldn't want to take anything away from what you're saying, but do we have similar stories with people who have had no existing Christian connection whatsoever? I mean, straight off the street, as it were, with no Christian background whatsoever, who have been startled to find that there's a way of being human, a way of living that they just don't find in the world.
I mean, I've definitely seen that a lot online, and I'm sure there are people probably at both churches I'm referring to. I can't think of anyone personally, although I feel like
we mustn't mention the name, no, but
but I'm sure there are people. Yeah, I mean, I see that online all the time. People that, you know, will say, "Oh, I used to be." They'll kind of give their last 10 years of faith, so to speak, and it'll go from, you know, I was an atheist, and then I was a pagan, and then I was into communism, and then I was, you know, they'll give this kind of rundown, and they all end up at orthodoxy, and it's just brilliant because they're not coming from a Christian background, but just purely through things they've seen online or through people they know, they're being brought to faith because I think that they inquire, and then, like the people I've just mentioned, they come to church and they see. I think they can feel the truth of it, which was partially what kind of got me when I started looking into it, and then when I went to my first divine liturgy, coming from an Anglican church, it just felt like it just felt right, like it's home. It's like this is Christianity. This is, you know, everything else. I went to an evangelical seminary, and the worship there is quite it's very evangelical, kind of slightly charismatic as well. And much like Anthony said, it just didn't resonate with me at all. Coming from a high church Anglican background, it felt very empty, and it didn't seem genuine. It was all just like a music show, and a lot of the kind of emotional way that people were acting, it didn't seem true or genuine. So when I came to Orthodoxy, it was the exact opposite, and I thought, "Oh, this is what I've been looking for."
Right. I think there is another. Let's not forget there is another component to this. There's the life that we have to support one another, to bear one another's burdens, to quote St. Paul, and fulfill the law of Christ. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. You know, when liturgy's over, another liturgy begins. Because I've noticed over many, many years, I'm sure this is true in many, many other churches at St. Aidan's, that people stay and they talk and they associate and they have food together. And that is also a crucial component in being church, because it means that people are developing quality relationships. You know, people are asking for prayers. Maybe they're troubled, they might lose their job. They ask for prayers. They are actually talking to one another, encouraging one another. And so this also is building up the body of Christ. They are submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. And I would, just as a little closing thing before we wrap up, I'm just addressing a wider audience than this one here. I would say, let your church be centered on God, but after liturgy, let there be the other liturgy of submitting oneself to the other. In other words, being the church in the quality of your relationships one with another, because our relationship with God must transform our relationships with each other. If our relationship with God is just coming to liturgy and then going, without submitting to one another, we've only got half the equation. Very important part of the equation, but only half of it. Okay?
Before you go, Father, I just wanted to say I'm looking to bring in an Iranian guy who, let's just say, he converted to Christianity very recently. He's been attending an evangelical, non-denominational, let's just say that, with what's it called now? The firework kind of churches. I'm looking to bring him to a liturgy, divine liturgy, and then I've got a Muslim friend who's looking to also come over as well. So, yeah.
Our doors are always open, but the people who are coming to us from these directions are not the ones who get drunk on the Easter Vigil and start abusing the priest.
Thanks.
Well, there we are.
I think.
Okay, thanks very much, everybody. Take care of yourselves, and this is the end of this Bible study. Next week we will gather again to look at the closing chapters of St. Paul's wonderful letter to the Ephesians. Take care of yourself. God bless. And we'll all say goodbye for now. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, Father.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Everyone.
you. God bless.
God bless.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.